Welcome, Ryan Castle here, the CEO of the Cape Cod and Island Association of Realtors, and I'm here with our Government Affairs Director, Leslie Sandberg. Thanks, Leslie, for joining us today.
Thanks, Ryan.
We want to talk today about what's happening at Fall Town Meeting and kind of walk you through some of the issues we're tracking in your town and what we're working on holistically around the Cape. And so we'll start with a little bit, Leslie, about kind of what we look at. So at the government affairs side of the advocacy side of the association, we have really a public policy guide that kind of sets the framework for the issues we look at.
Absolutely.
And where the Cape Cod and Island Association of Realtors stands on those issues, because there's the same issues that happen time and time again. And rather than continue to look at, have to decide where we stand each time it comes up, we kind of have standing policies. And so that all falls in our public policy guide. And we've made some recent additions to that public policy guide by adding a session on building codes, for instance, like the specialized in energy building codes. But how does that process work? How does the Public Policy Committee and the whole thing work? It's about putting together a policy plan.
Thanks for asking. I mean, Ryan, what we find is that it usually something bubbles up from our membership, whether it's, for instance, I'll take the example, the stretch code. The stretch code was changing and becoming more stringent, if you will, and people wanted to know what was it all about. They didn't know. So they said, hey, you know what? Enough people don't know. We really need to look at it, research it, and then build a policy around it. So what we did at the Public Policy Committee is that we actually had speakers come, and they were from both sides of the issue. Those who are pro-stretch code and talk about the benefits, those that are worried about the stretch code getting more restrictive and saying how, the cost problems and the grid problems with that. We went through that. We talked amongst ourselves, and then we also talked with other people. We spoke with you. And from that, we were able to come down with a policy that actually everybody was comfortable with and could represent the policy that we want appropriately, and then we asked the board of directors to take a look at it, and you can take it from there,
it, right? And that's the whole thing. It ultimately comes down to the board, but it starts at that committee level, and it starts with you guys getting research and hearing opinions from a lot of different people, and kind of saying, where do realtors stand on this based on our guiding principles of what we stand for, which is really the preamble to the code of ethics of being a realtor. So with that, you kind of see that whole guides of the Public Policy Committee role, the board director's role, and our policy guide that really then, once we have a policy guide, allows you and I to actually get to work. And actually allows us to contact and talk to, members of the select boards or planning boards or whatever, or staff, and say, hey guys, have y'all considered this? And it really helps inform us about the realtor's take on the issue by that kind of process through the Public Policy Committee. So I think that's a really important segment there. And so also on the main issues we look at, right? The last couple of years, they've been the same kind of issues.
Yes.
And really, we have really focused our policy efforts around 4 big issues, which is number 1 is bridge replacement. It's not necessarily a local issue, but our members have said this over and over. Our leadership has said this over and over. Bridge replacement and better access to Cape Cod is probably our biggest number 1 realtor issue right now, from the standpoint of how making sure we can do everything we can to move that forward. Another big issue that we are tackling on a daily basis is zoning reform and housing affordability issues, right? I think we all know the Cape has gotten more expensive. So how do we move forward on pushing zoning reform, pushing housing affordability, housing production issues, and moving forward that way? A big one component, because of once again, the preamble to the Code of Ethics talks about this, protection of private property rights.
Yes.
And how does that stuff that comes up, whether it's rental restrictions or whether it's building issues or building code issues, everything, how does it impact the private property rights of property owners?
Correct.
And then the last is a really Cape Cod specific thing, which is clean water infrastructure. This goes so much hand in hand with our housing affordability issue, but it's also our long-standing last several years campaign we've had about Realtors for Clean Water, about not only advocating for mechanisms like watershed permits and sewer infrastructure to move clean water forward, but also educating our members about the clean water infrastructure and some of the nuances that are coming out of there. So that's kind of some of our, I think, our longstanding policy issues.
Absolutely. And again, I think what people need to know with a public policy guide, it's a living, breathing guide, and it changes as issues come up. But also it helps us use that lens of, when we're looking at a public policy issue, is how would our members look at it? What do we need to do to be helpful for our members in advocating for this?
And that's why the public policy committee is so important, right? Yeah. And that's where they're looking at this stuff on a monthly basis, formulating it, giving us insight, opinions, that sort of thing.
And we've got a really good committee. And if anybody ever wants to join it, you'll always be welcome.
Absolutely. The Sandwich's town meeting is November 18th at 7 p.m. at Sandwich Middle High School. So the first on the warrant for them is Article 7. It's about making sure that they can actually enforce kind of their short-term rental bylaw.
Exactly. What they're looking to do here is they want to spend $25,000 of short-term rental inspection user fees to cover the cost of the inspections. So it's pretty much housekeeping, like a lot of fall town meetings. This is what they do. They do more housekeeping and financial things like this. So that's that. But then Article 8 and then the Article 9 are about wastewater. And the first one is a funding mechanism for wastewater, is that they have an infrastructure investment fund in Sandwich. And so what they're going to do with Article 8 is they want to increase the water infrastructure investment fund surcharge by 1%. So they're going to ask voters to increase the surcharge from 2% where it currently is to 3% of taxes assessed annually on real property. And that would begin July 1st, 2025.
So what that may mean, and just for people, the parlance, is it might be referred to as a WIF, which is a wastewater infrastructure fund, which is a surcharge on the property tax bill of 1% dedicated to wastewater funding. Very similar to the way for people to conceptually think about that. The way CPA, the way Community Preservation Act funding works, right? You can do up to 3% in CPA funding as a surcharge, and it would show up like that in the WIF. And so they have a current WIF that is 2% surcharge, and they're trying to go to 3 because I guess they feel they need more money in their WIF to fulfill their wastewater infrastructure projects.
Yeah, this is a trend that seems to be in Sandwich because they were the last, for local rooms tax, they were the last one to raise from 4 to 6. And this is also something, so they see the importance of wastewater, and this is one way to help fund it.
Okay. And then what are they doing in Article 9 on wastewater treatment?
It's about their treatment planning. So they're going to ask town voters to transfer $1.8 million from the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund to be expended under the purpose of further implementing the town's comprehensive water resources management plan.
So basically, in the WIF, what they're doing in the previous article, they already have a WIF, and they're raising money to store it in reserves for when they need to expend money. But they need to then come back to town meeting for a vote to expend that money. And that's what Article 9 is doing, is taking the money that they've already raised via the Water Infrastructure Fund and now expending the money.
Yeah, and it's great because this way they're going to be able to get wastewater planning, design, construction, implementation, and infrastructure. So Sandwich is moving forward when it comes to wastewater plans.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leslie.
Thank you.